Thank you. Thank you to the witnesses for appearing today. I note, Ms Schwartz, that your opening statement refers, and I quote, "The Jewish Council of Australia is a diverse coalition of Jewish academics, lawyers, writers and teachers who work with other racialised groups to tackle racism," end quote. So I take it from that that the Jewish Council of Australia does not purport to be a body which represents the Jewish community in Australia. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We don't represent the entirety of the Jewish community. And if I could just clarify, we also don't say that the Jewish community is a monolith. We think it's important to acknowledge that there are multiple Jewish communities, and Jewish people, like any group of people, have a variety of different views, and we speak for, and our views represent the views of a fast-growing number of Jewish people, including the 800 Jewish people in Australia who have signed on to our core statement of principles. And that statement of principles says that we believe that all forms of racism need to be tackled together, collectively.
If you're not a representative body for the Jewish community across the whole of Australia, why do you call yourselves the Jewish Council of Australia?
So our name is related to an old Jewish organisation that existed, that has been written about by one of our co-executive officers, and it is and we are a council made up of academics and lawyers and experts on racism, and we speak to Jewish issues and anti-Semitism, and so that's the foundation for our name.
Well, I'm comparing your organisation, and the name is the Jewish Council of Australia, to, say, the Executive Council of Australian Jewry Inc., which uses the same word council, and yet the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, its constituent bodies are the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputies, the Jewish Community Council Victoria Inc., Jewish Community Council of Western Australia Inc., Queensland Jewish Board of Deputies, Jewish Community Council of South Australia, the Hobart Hebrew Congregation, the ACT Jewish Community Inc. I'm sorry, there's quite a number of them. The Australasian Union of Jewish Students, the Australian Federation of WISO, Union for Progressive Judaism, Federation of Jewish Aged Care Services, the Maccabee Australia Inc., National Council of Jewish Women, B'nai B'rith of Australia and New Zealand, the Jewish National Fund of Australia, the Joint Distribution Committee Australia. So that, to me, has all the hallmarks of an umbrella representative council, refers to itself as the Executive Council of Australian Jewry Inc. So I put it to you again, why do you, I note the history you refer to, but why does the Jewish Council of Australia call itself a council when it is not a representative body? Isn't that misleading to the Australian people?
I would ask the Senator if you asked the exact same question to the previous person on this inquiry, Mr Colin Rubenstein, who appeared for the Australian Israel Jewish Affairs Council, which also has council in its name, is an unrepresentative body and has far fewer members on its website than us. I'm not sure that this is entirely relevant to this inquiry, but you know, if you're asking whether we are a representative group in the same way that ECAJ are, we're not, and we have never purported to be, and we have stated from the very start of our launch that we represent an alternative Jewish perspective, and one that is not heard by many mainstream Jewish organisations. And you know, it's devastating to us that many of our Jewish organisations in this moment have become, for all intents and purposes, Israel advocacy groups. And that is what we're seeing within many mainstream organisations. And this really sparked the need for an alternative Jewish council.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I think that it's precisely the failure of the existing groups to represent the diversity of opinion. And we know that recent evidence in the US suggests about a quarter of Jewish people either don't strongly identify with Israel or agree with the statement that Israel is an apartheid state. And that segment of the Jewish community is not being heard and not being acknowledged. And in fact, in speaking up, in seeking to make our voices heard, are facing a great deal of attempts to, rather than engage with our ideas, to undermine our legitimacy to speak, and in various different ways. And so I'd suggest that this voice is an important voice to take into consideration when you're discussing issues of anti-Semitism, as you are in this inquiry.
Oh, well, you are given an opportunity to speak here, and we welcome your participation. If I can ask a further question. In the 14 pages of your submission, unlike the submissions received from the other Jewish organisations, you don't provide a single example, a single lived experience of a student or staff member at a university suffering from anti-Semitism, subject to an anti-Semitism attack. Why?
I think what we are tackling here is a very difficult question of the very slippery definitions of anti-Semitism and the strong feelings that many people have. But there are a range of scholars, right, who are talking about things like the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and the constant conflation of Israel and Jewishness, talking about the way that is cultivating an effective resonance or attachment between Jewish individuals and the Jewish state, such that when they hear criticism of that state, it is experienced as fearsome and experienced as criticism or delegitimization of their Jewishness and identity. And I can talk to that to the extent that I didn't hear any criticism of Israel till I was 14. And when I first heard political criticism of Israel, I was deeply shocked. And I was affronted, and I felt that this was an attack on me personally. Right? So we're not saying all experiences of anti-Semitism are not legitimate. We know anti-Semitism is rising. The far right is intensely anti-Semitic. It's in its DNA, and that is not being covered by an inquiry or a bill that is so focused on campuses, because campuses are clearly being used to identify the pro-Palestinian movement as the locus of anti-Semitism in our society. So what we suggest, and the reason we are not showcasing very emotive personal testimonies, is that we need to, there is emotion everywhere. There's emotion on every side. This is a deeply distressing and vitriolic time that we actually need to be incredibly clear-sighted about when racial harm is occurring and when it's not. So I will give you an example. This was a chant at a pro-Palestinian rally at the university I work that was circulated online and went viral because it was recorded and said to have said the words, "Vice-Chancellor, you can't hide, we want Jewish genocide." In fact, that chant did not say that. It said, "Vice-Chancellor, we can't hide, you can't hide, we charge you with genocide." Now, we acknowledge that the people who heard that and the way that it was circulated would have been experienced as deeply distressing and as anti-Semitic. However, the actual statements that were made were different. So we need to be very clear about feelings and facts.
Okay. One last question. If I can. On page 13 of your submission, you talk about, and I quote, the subjective reality of the fears evident in the surveys. Why do you refer to subjective reality when there is clear and strong evidence, hundreds of submissions received of Jewish students and staffs being spat at, being physically abused, being physically assaulted, being fearful for their personal safety, being filmed, etc.? Why do you use this word subjective? Why can't you admit that the objective reality is that there are horrific, absolutely horrific examples of anti-Semitism occurring on our campuses?
If I could just clarify, Senator, we have stated multiple times throughout our submission and all of our public work that we are highly concerned about rises in anti-Semitism. And if I can speak from a personal perspective, we at the Jewish Council have been subjected to the types of vile anti-Semitism that you refer to. And so we are, of course, not discounting or in any way discrediting those experiences of anti-Semitism. Since launching the Council, we have received weekly, if not daily, emails and messages from far-right groups, from neo-Nazi groups, but also from some groups which want to blame all Jewish people for Israel's conduct. And we experience that anti-Semitism ourselves. It is disgusting. It has no place on our university campuses. And this is the exact problem with this bill. Those instances of anti-Semitism which involve physical abuse or violence or targeting of Jewish people because they are Jewish people should absolutely be condemned. Universities should absolutely be equipped to deal with those types of racism, because these types of racism are highly dangerous for us, and they are also dangerous for other groups who experience racism. And so we in no way discount those experiences of anti-Semitism, but what we say is that there needs to be clear-sighted definitions of anti-Semitism to ensure that we are adequately capturing those very vile experiences of anti-Semitism that you refer to, that we have ourselves personally experienced, from the types of political discomfort, the chant that, this disinformation that gets circulated about the Palestine Solidarity Movement, which is not anti-Semitic. Much of that content is not anti-Semitic. And this is the real problem here, if we have an inquiry which for many intents and purposes will be used to air sentiments such as criticisms of Israel, criticisms of the political ideology of Zionism, if those are termed to be anti-Semitic, then it means that we are far worse off and not able to actually tackle those very real instances of anti-Semitism that were contained in many submissions to this inquiry. And this is exactly the problem we see with this bill, is that it is engaging in a political exercise rather than an evidence-based exercise.
And Ms Schwartz, you don't refer to a single example in your submission.
Senator Scarr,
not a single
Senator
one.
Scarr,
we actually
sorry, if I can just stop you, I'm going to. We have to go to our next witnesses. Senator Henderson was seeking the call. I am going to conduct this inquiry and this hearing in a respectful way, given that the content we are talking about is ensuring the respect of students on campus. We're going to extend that respect to our witnesses. Senator Henderson, if you have a question, you have the call, and then our next witnesses are waiting for us.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to you both. Can I ask you, Dr. Strakoch, do you agree that all forms of anti-Semitism are repugnant?
Yes, absolutely, I do.
This is an inquiry into looking at the Coalition's bill to establish a judicial inquiry into campus anti-Semitism. I want to ask you about the ways in which universities have failed Jewish students and why better policies are required. Do you believe that displays of the swatch sticker at universities are anti-Semitic, or displays of the Star of David with a cross through it?
I believe that a Star of David as a Jewish symbol shouldn't be targeted by hate speech, but we have to acknowledge that the State of Israel's flag also has a Star of David on it, and criticising states, including their flags, is a legitimate form of political speech, even though it's very uncomfortable. And this is precisely why...
Sorry, I'm going to go through this quickly. I'm just going to go through this quickly. And what about the display of the swatch sticker at universities?
I personally, no, I do not agree with the use of the swastika to characterise a group of people.
I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. Do you support slogans such as River to the Sea and Intifada are being shouted on university campuses at Jewish students, which, of course, as we know, Intifada is another way of calling for the destruction of Israel, as is River to the Sea. Do you support those slogans?
I actually am feeling like some of these questions are not giving us the space to legitimately address our submissions to the inquiry, and are instead seeking to kind of...
No, well, sorry, we've got limited time. We're trying to understand your concerns. Do you believe that those slogans are anti-Semitic?
Senator Henderson, we would point you to, we've made multiple statements as an organisation, one on distinguishing between the Star of David and the Israeli flag, which we think is a very important thing for people to distinguish between and relates to the distinction between criticism of Israel and Jewish identity.
I'm going to draw you back to my question.
Senator Henderson, you are going to let the witness answer the question. No, Senator Henderson.
I'm entitled to interrupt if the question's not been answered, Chair.
Well, Senator Henderson, the witness is entitled to answer the question, and she's doing that.
Yes, I'm entitled to.
They're not one-word answer questions.
So the question is about the slogans
be respectful.
The river to the sea and Intifada, that's right. Do you believe that the use of those slogans on university campuses is anti-Semitic?
In fact, from the river to the sea has been widely acknowledged, including by the Palestinian movement, to refer to the equal treatment, the democratic equality of all peoples, including Jewish people and Palestinian people in the area.
Well, that's not what the Prime Minister, even the Prime Minister says, that he recognises that that is a call for the destruction of Israel
the Prime Minister also,
as a Jewish state.
The Prime Minister has also said that it is a slogan that is used by the Likud party as well to denote that there should not be equality between all citizens from the river to the sea. Okay. And it is crucial for us to actually look at what these slogans mean, what these words mean. The word intifada is an Arabic word meaning uprising. Despite the fact that some people may perceive it in a different context, we can't just say that blanketly a word or a slogan is anti-Semitic as such when the people who are saying these slogans are specifically saying they use these slogans as calls for equality, as calls for change.
So you're not aware of the use of the word intifada in relation to representing the suicide bombing attacks on Jewish people in Israel? You're not aware of that at all?
Oh, no, of course we are aware of that. And that's exactly why my answer specified that just because it is used in one context doesn't mean that that is the context in which all people use it.
Okay, so I'm just going to move on because I've got very limited time.
We have to move to our next witnesses.
Sorry.
You said you had one question.
Chair, no, I didn't say I had one question.
Well, Senator Henderson,
Chair, I've got some other questions which are quick. Just a few more minutes, please.
We do need to go to our next witnesses. We are going to be doing that in the next 2 minutes.
Okay. Do you condemn statements made on university campuses, statements like Zionists are terrorists and Zionists are not welcome? And do you believe, anti-Semitic?
I think a good place to end is to reiterate our statement that we feel it is very important that Jewishness and Zionism are not conflated for the safety of Jewish people. Right? So when Israel is acting in this way, the research tells us that when Israel conducts violence against Palestinian people, anti-Semitism rises because Jewish people are mistakenly perceived as responsible. So therefore, yes, Zionism needs to be
I just wanted to ask the question. Could I just turn you to the question? Do you condemn statements such as Zionists are terrorists being displayed or shouted at Jewish students on university campuses? And do you believe that that type of statement is anti-Semitic?
If they are shouted at Jewish people for being Jewish, however, strong and emotive criticism of Zionism and the State of Israel constitutes discomforting but legitimate political speech.
All right, thank you very much. I think that sums up this sort of organisation you are.